A janitor stopped a millionaire seconds before signing a $500 million deal. One whisper that froze his hand on the pen. What he uncovered afterward flipped the boardroom upside down and left everyone shocked beyond belief. The late afternoon sun was slipping behind the Austin skyline when Evan Carter sat at the long polished table, pen in hand. At 40, the founder and CTO of a fast-rising green tech firm, he was minutes away from signing the deal that promised to launch his company into a new league. The representatives of Granite Apex Holdings waited with poised smiles. Marco Diaz, his partner of 15 years, leaned forward with a look that seemed friendly but carried a strange urgency. Beside him sat Tessa Lynn, Evan's ex-girlfriend, perfectly composed as always, her sharp eyes glinting in the room's soft light. Everything appeared set. Billions in assets, years of hard work, and Evan's entire future rested in the lines of ink about to meet the paper. He exhaled, ready to make the move, when the door opened quietly at the back. A woman in a navy blue uniform pushed in a parking cart, head slightly lowered. No one paid her much attention. After all, she was just a parking attendant from the garage who sometimes carried receipts upstairs. Her name was Lena Ruiz. At 30, she blended into places most people ignored, her movements steady and efficient. She walked to the side of the room, picked up a trash can near Evan's chair, and bent to adjust the liner. Then, leaning just enough to let her voice reach him alone, she whispered, "Don't sign. It's a setup." Evan froze. His hand hovered, the pen only inches from the page. The sudden warning jolted him in a way he couldn't describe. He turned slightly, eyes wide, and saw Lena straighten as if nothing had happened. She lifted the trash can, slid it onto her cart, and wheeled it away without another glance. "What's wrong?" Marco asked smoothly. "Nerves?" Evan cleared his throat, buying himself time. "I need 5 minutes," he said, his voice tighter than usual. Tessa frowned. 5 minutes? We've been through every detail. There's nothing left to question." "Still," Evan replied, already rising, "I need them." He didn't wait for agreement. His chair scraped the floor as he walked briskly out, the contract untouched on the table. In the hallway, Lena was already halfway down, pushing her cart with calm precision. Evan caught up, his steps quick. "You," he said firmly, pointing toward her. "With me. Now." Surprised but composed, Lena nodded. He led her into a small break room, closing the door behind them. Crossing his arms, Evan fixed his eyes on her. "Explain. And convince me you're not insane for interrupting something this important." Lena still held the empty trash bag in one hand. She swallowed, then said quietly, "I overheard things I wasn't supposed to. They're using this contract to strip you of your company. Marco and Tessa are working with Granite Apex. They've hidden clauses. If you sign, you'll lose nearly everything." Her words struck like cold wind. Evan wanted to laugh at the absurdity, yet the tremor in her voice and the directness of her gaze unsettled him. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 8 months. Night shifts. "And your name?" "Lena Ruiz." Evan studied her face. She had nothing to gain from this. If anything, she risked her job. "If this is a lie or some ploy, you're fired immediately," he warned. "I understand," Lena said steadily. "But if I stayed silent and you lost everything, I'd never forgive myself." For a moment, Evan looked at the reflection in the glass wall, the city of Austin alive with lights below. His world had been steady until seconds ago. Now it felt uncertain. He turned back. "Do you have proof?" "I do," Lena answered. "Screenshots, notes, recordings. But I can't show them here. Tonight, 7 o'clock, this room. I'll bring everything." Evan considered. She wasn't pleading. She was certain. "Fine, bring it. But if you don't convince me, this will be your last day." Lena nodded once. With that, she left the break room as quietly as she had entered the boardroom. When Evan returned to the table, all eyes were on him. Marco leaned forward, eyebrows lifted in question. "Everything taken care of?" "Yes," Evan replied, though his heart was pounding. He sat but didn't reach for the pen. Actually, I need to review a few clauses again. What? Tessa's voice was sharp. We've reviewed this for weeks. And that's why I want one last look. He closed the folder firmly. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. The room tensed. Marco's knuckles pressed against the table. Evan, this doesn't make sense. We're wasting time. Granite has other interested parties. Then let them be, Evan said coldly. One night won't matter. Javier, Granite's advisor, slammed a hand on the table. The market is volatile. It's now or never. Evan stared at their agitated faces. The pressure didn't feel natural. Something about Lena's warning suddenly rang true. He slid the contract into his briefcase. The decision is mine. Tomorrow. He walked out, leaving the others bristling with frustration. At exactly 7 that evening, Evan returned to the break room. Lena was already waiting, a small backpack on her lap. She rose when he entered. Show me, he said, sitting across from her. Lena unlocked her phone, hands trembling slightly, and opened files. It started 3 weeks ago, she explained. I was moving cars near the executive office late at night. I overheard Marco and a woman, Tessa, talking. They mentioned you, the merger, and hidden debts. She showed him a blurry photo of Tessa through a crack in the office door. Evan's chest tightened. He knew that face. Tessa, the woman he had once loved, now sitting on the opposite side of his future. Lena pressed play on an audio file. Marco's voice came through clearly. Once he signs, we'll control the assets. He suspects nothing. He's always been too trusting. Then Tessa's laugh, light and cruel. In 48 hours, his company is ours. Evan's blood chilled. He ran a hand across his face, struggling to believe. That's not all, Lena said, swiping through more photos. Contracts with clauses different from what Evan had seen. Bank transfers to Marco's accounts. Notes scribbled in margins. In the version you reviewed, you keep 60% control. In theirs, you drop to 15%. Evan's jaw tightened. That's fraud. And here, she said, showing another image. A transfer of $31 million from Granite's account to Marco's personal one 2 weeks ago. Evan stood, staring at the window. Austin's skyline shimmered with light, but everything looked dim to him. 15 years of friendship with Marco. Shattered. Why are you telling me this? Because it's right, Lena answered. She hesitated, then added softly, I couldn't watch someone be betrayed the way I was. Her words carried more weight than she realized. Evan turned back, his voice low. I need more proof. More than this. Can you get it? It's risky, she admitted. But yes. Then be careful, Evan said. He locked eyes with her. If this is true, Marco isn't just betraying me. He's destroying everything we built. Lena nodded, slipping the phone back into her bag. We'll find out the truth. That night, Evan lay awake, her words echoing in his head. Suspicion had cracked open a door he never thought he'd look behind. And what he saw there was darkness he wasn't ready to face. Yet now he had no choice. The contract still waited for his signature. But so did Betrayal. And in the shadows of Austin, the game was only beginning. Evan arrived at the office before sunrise the next morning, unable to shake Lena's warning or the images she had shown him. Sleep had refused to come, and by 3 in the morning he found himself pacing his loft, replaying Marco's laugh in the recording, Tessa's mocking tone, and the sight of those altered documents. He needed to know for himself. He logged into the company's secure servers, determined to dig deeper. Hours slipped away as he combed through files, contracts, and spreadsheets. Most of it seemed clean, but Evan knew that if Lena was telling the truth, the real danger would be buried deep. Finally, on page 47 of the main contract, he saw it, a reference to Addendum K. He had never seen such an addendum. His pulse quickened as he searched the server. Hidden inside an encrypted folder marked Legal Archive, he found it. The file opened to reveal the truth. Addendum K detailed a post-merger asset distribution that transferred 75% of MillerTech's holdings to Apex Meridian LLC, a shell registered in the Cayman Islands. The listed shareholders? Marco Diaz and Tessa Lynn. Evan's hands shook as he scrolled down. His so-called partner and his former girlfriend had crafted a plan to strip him of everything. But there was more. Tracing recent transfers, Evan found over $31 million moved out of company accounts in the last 2 months. The money was marked as merger preparation fees and consulting. None of the account numbers matched Granite Apex's. Following the trail, he saw the funds funneled through layers of accounts, landing in Marco's personal network. He dug further, pulling archived emails he had never been copied on. The messages between Marco and Tessa read like instructions for a hostile takeover. One line stabbed him hardest. David is too naive. He'll never see it coming until it's too late. The betrayal hit like a blade between his ribs. Marco wasn't just a colleague. He had been Evan's closest friend, his brother in all but blood. They had built this company together from an idea scribbled on napkins to a tech firm valued in the hundreds of millions. And Tessa, he had once imagined marrying her until she walked away. Now he understood why. By the time the sun rose over Austin, Evan had gathered enough evidence to know Lena was right. But the realization came with another weight. The way he had abandoned her the day before. When Marco accused her publicly, when security marched her out, Evan had stayed silent. He hadn't defended her. That memory burned worse now than ever. He couldn't undo the humiliation, but he could try to make it right. Using the HR system, he pulled Lena's file. Expecting to see a short, unremarkable record, he instead found a resume that stopped him cold. Lena Ruiz, age 30. Bachelor's degree in finance and data analytics from the University of Houston. Former analyst at a respected consulting firm. Why would someone like her work as a parking attendant? The notes in her file gave a clue. Dependent medical coverage for a family member. That afternoon, while the office buzzed with rumors of a postponed signing, Evan drove to East Austin. He parked in front of a worn apartment complex, far from the world of glass towers and investors. Apartment 2B belonged to Lena Ruiz. He knocked. After a pause, the door opened just a crack, chain still on. Lena's face appeared, eyes tired, guarded. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "I know the truth now," Evan said. "About Marco, about Tessa, about everything." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "How convenient. Now you believe me, after you let them drag me out in front of everyone." "Please," Evan said, his voice low. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," Lena snapped, starting to close the door. Desperate, Evan stopped it with his hand. "Lena, I found the files. Addendum K. The transfers. The shell company. You were right about all of it." Silence. Then a voice from inside. "Who is it?" Lena sighed. "My sister," she murmured. She removed the chain and opened the door fully. The small apartment was modest, the furniture old but neatly kept. Family photos lined the walls. A young woman, frail and pale, appeared from the hall. "Noelle," Lena said softly. "This is Evan Carter." Noelle Ruiz, 24, moved carefully as if each step cost her strength. She smiled faintly. "Hi. You must be Lena's boss." "Former boss," Lena corrected quickly, shooting Evan a look. Noelle's smile didn't falter. "Lena talks about you. She says you're not like the others, that you treat people with respect." The words twisted in Evan's chest. He had betrayed that respect. He had let Lena be disgraced. He shook Noelle's frail hand gently. Once Noelle returned to her room, Evan turned to Lena. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" "I told you she needed surgery," Lena said flatly. "That's all you needed to know." "What kind?" Evan pressed. Lena's voice broke. "A heart valve transplant. Without it, the doctors give her 6 months. It costs $160,000. The insurance from this job covered part. Now it's gone." Evan felt crushed by the weight of it. "I'll pay," he said quickly. "No," Lena stood abruptly, her eyes blazing. "I don't want your pity or your charity." "It's not pity," Evan said firmly. "It's responsibility. I made a mistake. I hurt you. Let me fix this." "You can't fix it," Lena said bitterly. "You betrayed me." When I stood in front of everyone, begging you to speak up, you chose silence. You chose Marco. Evan raked a hand through his hair. You're right. I was a coward. But now I know the truth, and I want to make it right. Some things can't be made right. She turned away, staring out the small window at the cracked pavement below. All I have left is my sister. That's enough. Evan stood there, defeated. Before he left, he looked at her one last time. This isn't over. I'll expose Marco and Tessa, and I'll clear your name. You deserve that much. Do it without me, Lena said quietly, not meeting his eyes. Evan walked out with a heaviness he hadn't known in years. Back in his car, he looked at the building where two sisters struggled just to survive. He realized Marco hadn't only tried to steal his company. His betrayal had almost destroyed the only person brave enough to save him. The next day, Evan made calls. He couldn't hand Lena money directly, but he could still help. Through the donor program at Del Seaton Medical Center, he arranged an anonymous payment. By Thursday, Noelle's doctor called Lena with unexpected news. A federal aid program had been approved to cover her surgery in full. Tears filled her eyes as she hugged her sister, believing in good fortune. She never suspected Evan Carter had been behind it. Meanwhile, Marco grew restless. His smiles were thinner, his tone sharper. Cal Weaver, the pushy advisor in his mid-40s, pressed Evan at every chance. The deal has to close this week. Markets don't wait. Evan stalled, claiming legal reviews. By Saturday evening, Evan decided he had to see Lena again. He found her working a weekend shift at a small accounting office, wiping down glass doors. When she saw him waiting outside, she bristled. Are you following me now? Yes, Evan admitted, out of breath. But not the way you think. What do you want? She asked flatly. To talk. Just 5 minutes. About what? About how you were right. About how I was wrong. About how I need your help. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't walk away. The wind whipped down the street, cold against the autumn air. She sighed and gestured toward a cafe at the corner. 5 minutes. Inside. In the quiet warmth of the cafe, they sat with hot drinks between them. Evan opened a folder from his backpack. Inside were the documents, Apex Meridian, the wire transfers, the fake account numbers. He pushed them toward her. This is worse than I thought, Lena murmured, scanning the pages. I want to expose them Monday at the board meeting, Evan said. But I can't do it alone. I need your evidence. And I need you there. She looked up sharply. Why me? Because you saw what I couldn't. Because you had the courage I lacked. And because, Evan hesitated, then continued, I want you back at MillerTech. Not as staff, but as director of risk and compliance. Someone I can trust to guard the company. Lena stared at him, stunned. You're serious? Completely. Silence hung between them. Then, almost against her will, Lena smiled faintly. You're crazy, Evan. Maybe, he said softly. But I'd rather be crazy with the right people than safe with traitors. They left the cafe under the glow of city lights. At the subway steps, Evan paused. One more thing. Can I kiss you? Lena hesitated, searching his face. Then she nodded. The kiss was gentle, cautious, but real. When they pulled apart, she whispered, This just made things more complicated. The best things usually do, Evan replied. As she disappeared into the station, Evan stood in the cool night air, the folder pressed against his chest. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. On Monday, the truth would come out. But Marco and Tessa weren't finished. And they had plans of their own. Monday morning arrived heavy with tension. The boardroom smelled faintly of polish and coffee, yet the air was sharp with anticipation. Evan Carter stood near the long table, notes in hand, while Lena Ruiz waited in the corridor with her small backpack. She had agreed to come, though only after hours of hesitation. Together, they planned to show the board how Marco Diaz and Tessa Lynn had conspired to steal the company. But fate had a way of shifting plans. 10 minutes before the meeting, the door to Evan's office burst open. Marco swept in, his usual easy smile now tight, forced. Tessa followed, elegant and cold, a leather folder tucked under her arm. She shut the door behind them with a deliberate click. Evan remained standing, shoulders squared. "You're early," he said. Marco's smile stretched. "We need a word before the board gathers." He placed a stack of papers on Evan's desk. "Proof that you've been misusing company funds." Evan frowned and glanced at the documents. They were spreadsheets showing transfers from Millertech accounts to a personal fund in his name. At first glance, it looked damning. "That's fake," Evan said quietly. "Not to them," Tessa replied smoothly. "Once the board sees this, your career is over. Fraud, self-dealing, breach of fiduciary duty. They'll drag you out in handcuffs." Marco leaned closer, voice low but sharp. "And that girl, Lena Ruiz, you think we don't know what you've been doing for her? Helping with her sister's hospital bills? Sneaking her into meetings? The board will love hearing about your little side project." Evan's chest tightened. They knew about Noelle. They had turned Lena into a weapon. "You leave her out of this," he warned. "Can't," Marco said. "She's leverage. One word from us, and your company, your reputation, her family, they're all finished." Evan clenched his fists. He had faced tough negotiations, corporate predators, and ruthless investors, but this was different. This was betrayal by the people he once trusted most. And their threat to Lena cut deeper than anything. "Cancel the board meeting," Tessa advised, her tone silky but merciless. "Say it's postponed again. Sign the contract quietly. We'll handle the rest." Evan stared at them. For a moment, his mind roared with anger. But then the image of Lena and Noelle flashed before him. If he fought today, they would be destroyed. Slowly, with an effort that almost broke him, he nodded once. "Fine. The meeting is off." Tessa smiled, victorious. "Good choice." When they left, Evan sank into his chair, shaking. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. He picked up his phone to call Lena, but stopped. How could he explain that he had folded again? That he had let fear rule him? That night, the office was quiet. Lena didn't go home. She moved through back corridors she knew well from her months of night work. Her uniform let her slip past guards who barely noticed her. She carried no plan but her instincts, and those instincts told her Marco had left something behind. On the 15th floor, she reached his private office. The door was locked, but she had once watched a cleaner open it with a spare key hidden in the janitor's closet. Heart hammering, she retrieved the key and let herself in. The room was sleek, cold, decorated with expensive art. She began at the desk, checking drawers, folders, and files. Nothing obvious. Then her eyes landed on a simple pen holder by the computer. She picked it up and heard a rattle. Inside, hidden beneath the pens, was a tiny voice recorder. Her pulse raced as she pressed play. Static, then Marco's voice. "He won't risk her. He'll fold. Lena Ruiz is the pressure point. As long as her sister's hanging by a thread, Carter will do what we say." Then Tessa's laugh followed. "Perfect. By the time he realizes, the company's gone." Lena's knees went weak. She steadied herself against the desk, rage and fear surging through her veins. They had been watching her, using Noelle's illness as a weapon. She searched further, finding a folder tucked behind books on the shelf. Inside were photos, grainy shots of her walking home, of Noelle entering the hospital, captions written in Marco's handwriting. "Keep leverage. Monitor daily." She snapped photos of everything, hands trembling. Then she copied the recorder files to her phone. Before leaving, she carefully placed everything back where it was, locking the office behind her. At dawn, Lena knocked on Evan's door. He opened it looking hollow, as if he hadn't slept at all. "You were right," she said, holding out her phone. "And I have proof." Inside, Evan listened to Marco's recorded voice, saw the surveillance photos, read the captions. His face hardened, his guilt giving way to fury. "They threatened Noelle," he muttered, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. "They threatened both of us," Lena corrected softly. "But now we can stop them." For the first time in days, Evan's eyes lit with determination. "We reset the board meeting. Today. 2 o'clock. This time, we don't back down. At 2 p.m., the directors gathered in the boardroom, their expressions wary. Evan stood at the head of the table, but instead of launching into figures, he gestured to the door. Before we begin, I want to introduce someone. Lena stepped inside, head high, no longer in her uniform but in a simple blazer Evan had insisted she wear. This is Lena Ruiz, Evan announced. Effective immediately, she is our new Director of Risk and Compliance. And she has something you all need to hear. Marco and Tessa exchanged quick glances, their smiles faltering. Cal Weaver shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lena placed her phone on the table and pressed play. Marco's voice filled the room. He won't risk her. He'll fold. Lena Ruiz is the pressure point. Tessa's laugh followed. By the time he realizes, the company's gone. Gasps rippled through the board. Next, Lena opened a folder of documents. Here are 2 versions of the merger contract, she explained. One that Evan reviewed, which shows him keeping 60% control. And another, hidden in Addendum K, that gives 75% of assets to Apex Meridian LLC, a shell company owned by Marco Diaz and Tessa Lin. She displayed the wire transfers next. $31 million moved from company accounts into Marco Diaz's personal network, labeled as consulting fees. The room grew heavy with silence. The directors whispered among themselves. At last, Riley North, Granite Apex's senior representative, stood. His face was pale, furious. Let me be clear. Granite Apex had no knowledge of this. We do not condone fraud. This merger is off until further notice. He turned toward Marco and Tessa with disgust. We'll be pursuing legal action. Just then, the door opened. Detective Maya Holt of the Austin Police Department entered with 2 officers. Calm, authoritative, she walked straight to Marco and Tessa. Marco Diaz, Tessa Lin, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and extortion. The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Marco tried to stand, but the officers were already on him. Tessa's composure cracked as the cuffs snapped around her wrists. As they were led out, Marco shot Evan a glare filled with venom. This isn't over. Evan met his gaze without flinching. Yes, it is. When the door closed behind the police, the board turned to Evan and Lena. For the first time in weeks, Evan felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by something stronger, clarity. But he also knew this wasn't the end of the story. What had begun as whispers in a boardroom had grown into a war. And while Marco and Tessa were gone, the scars they left behind would shape everything that came next. The weeks after the arrests felt like a storm breaking into calm. For Evan, the silence of his office was no longer heavy with doubt but filled with relief. Marco and Tessa were gone, their plots exposed and their power stripped. Yet, beneath the calm, something new began to grow, an awareness that survival was not enough. The company had to rebuild, and so did he. The board moved quickly to stabilize operations. They issued statements, reassured investors, and distanced MillerTech from the scandal. Through it all, Evan made one choice clear. Lena Ruiz would stay, not in the shadows, but as Director of Risk and Compliance. Some directors raised eyebrows at the idea of a former parking attendant stepping into an executive role, but Evan didn't waver. When Lena walked into meetings with her quiet confidence and well-prepared notes, doubts began to fade. She had earned her place the hard way, through integrity and courage, and Evan made sure everyone understood that. Meanwhile, Lena's life shifted too. Noelle's surgery was scheduled at Del Seaton Medical Center. Thanks to the anonymous donation she still believed came from a government aid program. On the morning of the operation, Evan sat in the waiting room, pretending he was just another family friend. Hours later, when the surgeon walked out with a tired but relieved smile, Lena nearly collapsed with gratitude. Noelle would recover. Evan excused himself quietly, not needing recognition for what he had done. The sight of Lena crying with joy was enough. One evening, weeks later, Evan asked Lena to meet him at Mount Bonnell, a place where the city stretched endlessly beneath the fading light. She arrived in a simple jacket, her hair loose, the weight of months of stress finally softening from her face. He was waiting near the railing, a small velvet box in his hand. "I'm not a man who's good with speeches," he admitted, his voice unsteady. "But I know one thing. You didn't just save this company. You saved me. You showed me courage when I had none. And you reminded me that trust, once earned, is stronger than anything." He opened the box. Inside was a modest ring, nothing flashy, just simple and true. "Lena Ruiz, will you marry me?" Her breath caught. Tears blurred her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing, only looked at him as the wind stirred around them. Then she smiled, wide and real. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Months later, the Umlauf sculpture garden in Austin was alive with color and quiet music. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered under the arch of trees. Pastor Elaine Brooks, a warm woman in her 60s, led the vows. Noelle stood as Lena's maid of honor, her health restored, her smile radiant. When Evan and Lena exchanged rings, the applause that followed felt like more than celebration. It felt like a new beginning. Under Lena's leadership in her new role, MillerTech began to grow again, not by chasing risky deals, but by building steady partnerships grounded in trust. Investors noticed the change. Revenues rose 28% in a year. The company's reputation, once threatened, was stronger than ever. People whispered that it was Lena's cautious eye and Evan's renewed integrity that had turned the tide.